It was the year 2005, and the beginning of horror stories on the internet had just begun. Tonight, we will be taking a look at the origin of the creepypasta known as The Rake, and the influence it has had over the media for over a decade. Originating on the B-board of 4chan, an anonymous user made a post saying the following line that would change the internet horror game forever. Hey, let's make a new monster. Being 4chan, many ideas were pitched and submitted, but only one really captured the reader's attention. The idea was as follows. Alright, this is for the people who like the 3 eyes, no apparent mouth, pale skin one. Here's what we've got so far. Humanoid, about 6 feet tall when standing, but usually crouches and walks on all fours. It has very pale skin. The face is blank, as in no nose, no mouth. However, it has 3 solid green eyes, one in the middle of its forehead, and the other 2 on either side of its head towards the back. Usually seen in front yards and suburban areas, usually just watches the observer, but will stand up and attack if approached. When it attacks, a mouth opens up, as if a hinged skull that opens at the chin, reveals many, tiny, but dull teeth. Of course, not everyone was sold on the idea, so users made revisions to it, like 6 feet would be a more appropriate humanoid size, with pale grayish skin and 2 eyes on the front of its head. Another, 6 feet tall but crouching, and 2 slightly larger than human eyes. The final design of this rake is described as a pale, thin, naked humanoid figure that can be compared to a hairless dog or cat. It has incredibly long and sharp claws, which led to its name. It is also described commonly as having 2 blank, white eyes. The beast is sadistic and has a tendency to stalk and torture its victims, and finally, after the insanity has set in, it kills them without mercy. It has strength and speed that can be used to overpower and overwhelm its victims with ease. It is easily able to maneuver around its environment and kill its victims with extremely sharp claws, and always leaves a bloody scene behind in its wake. It tends to stalk its victims, whether by sitting at the edge of their beds or by following them in the woods near where they live. Now that an explanation of the creature has been given, let's dig a little deeper and learn about the famous story authored by Brian Somerville titled The Rake. It is the summer of the year 2003, and there have been various sightings in the northeastern United States of a strange humanoid creature. There are few surviving records of this creature, but they all share a common description of the being that would become to known as the Rake. Most of these records come from New York. However, there is one from the state of Idaho. There have been ongoing investigations into the creature, where people came together and started to research and look for it. Within 3 years of this, over 24 reports spanning from the 12th century up until that year, coming from 4 different continents, all sharing the same common description of the creature, were obtained. It is at this point that the character who is the writer explains how they had been conversing with one of these collaborators, and managed to get some excerpts of these documents that the member was going to be putting into a book that they were writing. One of these excerpts contains a suicide note from the year 1964 and reads as follows. As I prepare to take my life, I feel it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once, I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. There are a few other notable excerpts, but the 2 I believe to be the most important are a sailor's note from 1691 and a recollection from a witness in 2006 that also refers the same note and other documents. The sailor wrote simply, "He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake." The witness is a woman who lost her husband and daughter due to the creature. She and her family were stalked by the Rake. This is the retelling of her encounter. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to seal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly that his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what had caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For this reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned about its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed and then crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while, just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee, then ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' rooms. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I were rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the Rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. Neither of them survived. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now referred to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving a creature in the first 3 pages. Never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. However, there were many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near the end of my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 solid weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the third week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe it spoke to me when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I have not seen the rake since he ruined my life, but I know he has been in my room while I slept. I know and fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. This is probably the most famous story of the rake, and it shows how the creature seems to almost enjoy playing with its targets. Simply put, this creature must be avoided at all costs, because an encounter could mean death for you or your loved ones. Now we will look at pieces of media that the rake has been referenced, mentioned in, or has had an active role in. The rake has been featured in several online stories and had a movie back in 2018 of the same name. It also had a horror game also titled The Rake. Besides the countless fanfiction writings about it, another fan-made media interpretation comes from the Everymanhybrid YouTube channel series. The beast makes an appearance or is mentioned in 13 of the channel's videos, starting from Cops Checked, No Bodies, and ending in the Princeton tapes, The Visit. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed the video. I find it fitting that the first video I upload is the first mainstream horror monster made by the internet. If you have any suggestions for the topic of the next video, please leave a comment down below. Thank you, and until next time, I have an alias. Thank you for watching.